Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jonathan Fisher. With recent restrictions on retargeting and increased marketing competition overall, business development leaders are finding that email based outreach is suddenly more important than it's been in a long time. But it has to be done right. Getting your messages delivered, opened, and creating ROI requires just the right tactics and strategies. And today's guest is here to help with just that. For the last decade or so, Chrisley Ceme has made himself an expert on helping businesses gain customers and deliver services more effectively, especially using email. As a director of strategy and business development for tech startup Senders, he's got his hand on the pulse of what works and what doesn't when it comes to email based outreach. So, this is going to be a great conversation. Chrisley, welcome to the show. Fantastic to have you.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it, Jonathan. Thank you for having me as well.
Right on. Well, we've got a great topic. I know a lot of our listeners are very excited to learn more about. Uh, Email is one of those things that even divides opinions, I think, among folks trying to work and gain customers. But before we jump into some of that stuff, would you share a little bit with the listener? How did you come by all the insights you're going to be sharing today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Came by through it really just starting on my journey out of college, like most people. Spent too many years partying and not many years, I guess, studying, if you will. But came out of school and said, "All right, what can I do?" Got into sales. Really started with door-to-door sales and kind of grew into tech sales and started as an SDR. From there, the company that I was working for, at the time, they weren't really established in cold email themselves, so we were really all experimenting together. And I found out very quickly that if you send a lot of emails at random, your domain can get burned. And we went through that tremuffle at that company. And then from there is where I started to pick up these skill sets and continue those on my journey throughout sales.
Well, yeah, sometimes the best lessons are the ones gained through some pain. That's for sure.
For sure.
Well, great. Well, we're excited to jump in because it is such a useful topic right now with, as I mentioned at the intro, so many changes in the online marketplace. We're going to jump in just a moment. But first, a little reminder to our live audience. Hey, it's live. This is your opportunity to participate. So go ahead and start posting your questions whenever they occur to you in the chat. We're going to bank those for the very end. And at the bottom of the half hour, we'll have some live Q&A with our online expert right here together. So, Chrisley, jumping right in then. So, what are, I always like to ask, what are the leading mistakes that are currently being made by marketers when it comes to their email outreach?
Great question. Currently, with email, I would say the biggest mistake that people are making currently is that they're so focused on the content and what it is that they're selling, and ultimately trying to sell their product through cold email rather than using cold email as an introductory piece, whether it's to book a meeting or bring out more awareness to yourselves, whatever the case may be, instead of trying to use cold email to ultimately sell the consumer, because now you're just adding way too much filler words and words in your emails in general. It's not sticking to the point of getting them in conversation.
So I totally get that when you are seeing a message that is going right in for the kill, it can be pretty off-putting. Uh, Are there other mistakes? I mean, you mentioned the one about, kind of blowing up your domain. Do you still see that today? Folks kind of trying to jump back in and getting burned by the internet authorities, as it were,
Oh,
by overdoing
oh
their
yes,
domain.
that's certainly still out there and quite prevalent. Um, and simply put, I can see certainly why that happens. Whereas years ago, yes, that did happen to me, but it took um, a lot more volume, a lot more basically damaging the system before that occurred. Whereas now, your big email service providers are much more attuned and aware of these things going on. And yes, you definitely want to make sure your domain is secure prior to doing this. And there are many, simple ways of doing this, especially in the beginning when you know you're not going to be having that much volume to begin with, that we can certainly get into as we continue on. But yes, definitely having that secure deliverability is a big, big one. And it's not as daunting or pricey or anything like that as people may assume that it is, just because it's tech. And typically, when we don't know things, we assume it costs much more.
Yeah. Well, and I think we'll segue into something I did want to ask about, which is kind of maybe you could briefly make the case for email based outreach because I find in my conversations with especially founders, a lot of business development people may know that that email marketing has legs, but I think a lot of founders feel kind of maybe if they're not outright burned on it, they feel a little hesitant to really buy in fully in terms of what its capabilities are. I don't know if maybe you're in a different circle. I don't know if you find that still true, but maybe could you make the case for email marketing and in terms of today's situation online?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge vital piece that I think many founders miss because it's not, quote unquote, the in vogue thing to do. It's kind of always been there, and it's, some people look at it as scraping the bottom of the barrel, but in fact, especially in today's market, when you just look at the price for advertising and promotion and putting yourself out there, cold email is something that you can start relatively fast, relatively inexpensively, and get a lot of reach versus going through paid ads where yes you can be somewhat even more targeted with paid ads and things of that nature, but in regards to getting started quickly, A/B testing your product in terms of product market fit, messaging, so on and so forth, your best bet is actually going to definitely be cold email, just from the amount of people you can reach in the amount of time you can reach them and get good results back to see kind of where you want to take things moving forward.
And so maybe does it belong on our list of mistakes that a lot of business owners are underutilizing this as an engine for growth?
Oh, absolutely. Especially in their beginning phases where, yeah, people want to, try and raise so much funding to be able to do paid ads and bring in a social team, and where all those things are great and necessary. I don't want to belittle their value. You can get started on a lot of those things while in those beginning phases. And even as your company is, established and whatever the case may be, to just be talking to people that you would not be talking to.
Mm,
If the time old adage, time is money is true, the time that you're spending talking to those high leverage, high target customers, you can also have your cold email campaigns running in the background, reaching out to people who, even if you only get 1 to 3% of those people to convert into paying customers, that's 1 to 3% more people than you were getting previously by not reaching out to them.
right. So it sounds like, if I can summarize, I mean, it's kind of a low cost, low risk channel for for potential growth, and it's almost like why wouldn't you? Is that would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, and in fact, I'd say the only risk, if you want to call it a risk, is that domain, damage, which can certainly be alleviated in a multitude of different ways.
Well, and then, so that brings us to a great entry point into what are the best practices. So let's kind of be kind of lay it out for us, Chrisley, as an expert. And this is what you do every day for clients, right? Is help them structure email campaigns that will work. What are the key elements in a campaign that's working, and then give us the tactics and strategies to make all of those elements be effective, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, first and foremost, what you want to do is set up that secure infrastructure in regards to sending your emails. Because regardless of your subject lines, your content, even your targeting, if the emails aren't getting there and your domain is being burned, it's all for naught. So now, in ways in which you can do that, you can certainly set up what's called a sending subdomain, which, very simply put, is a prefix and period in front of your domain, or a separate domain, if you will, off of yours. And what that will align for, as long as you have it set up with the proper, DNS configurations, DMARC, so on and so forth, is that your email service provider, even though it has the same branding, will consider that sending subdomain a completely separate entity from your main domain. So, for example, if your website is google.com, the email address that these cold emails may be coming from might be something like Jonathan at try.google.com. With that Jonathan at try.google.com sending address, Google in this case would look at that as a completely separate entity from google.com. So that's the first layer, if you will, of protection.
Hmm.
And then from there, you would definitely want to, be rotating your IP addresses. You can use a platform like a Instantly or SendGrid or something to that degree. Um, get this set up into like a sequencer tool, simply like a Mailchimp, Apollo. There's many different tools out there to have your setup technically to make sure, okay, your main domain is not going to get burned, and you can now start to iterate on these email campaigns.
All right, so you've got to have the infrastructure in place to not get burned,
Mhm.
and maybe you can explain for listeners that are just giving this a fresh look. What happens if your domain does get burned? Like, what does that actually look like?
Oh yeah. No, great question. So what will start to happen is your internal emails, emails that maybe you're sending to current customers, colleagues, teammates, whatever the case may be, will either start falling into spam folders or end up coming in as phishing potentially. Um, you'll start to not be able to potentially even send emails at all, like they're just not getting sent out, so on and so forth. And then what ends up happening is you have to contact, either again Google, Microsoft, whoever your email service provider is. Typically, it's one of those two who are doing it this severely, um, and then basically take stop sending for about 2 to 3 weeks while they reset your servers and systems and get you all up and running again to where you can do this. So now, if you had current prospects that were in communications with your sales teams, whatever the case may be, those can end up being halted.
Mhm.
Invoices that you're sending out might not be reaching these clients, and now you're not receiving payments, thinking your clients are being delinquent or something, when in actuality they're not even getting the invoices. There's a whole multitude of things that can occur. It can be fixed, so it's not, hey, once this happens you're screwed forever, but it takes a whole bunch of time, which now ends up resulting in a dip in other business arenas.
Okay, so I mean, it is something to take pretty seriously. It could create headaches and cost you money. Wouldn't
For
might
sure.
probably won't end your business, but certainly to be avoided. But like a lot of risks, like don't go down there and stand on that middle rail. It sounds like it's also pretty easy to avoid um, by having other subdomains. So,
Correct.
like, so if I'm in a startup and I want to get rolling, is one enough to get rolling, or do I need multiple? Or talk to us about that.
Yeah. No, great question. In the beginning, I would say 1 to 2 is more than enough to get rolling. Um, I would say ideally, if you can do two in the beginning, that's great, and have one that's actually not being in use, that's just warming in the background, just in case you have to swap out one of them. You can continue sending your cold emails as normal while the other one is being swapped out and put back in. Um, from that sending subdomain, yes, you'll want to you'd want to use like a separate SMTP server for these emails to go out. Simply put, you can think of a separate server almost like a VPN that's just kind of scrambling the the IP addresses, so that again it's another layer, so that the email service providers aren't marking your emails as spam, or excuse me, looking at your stuff and saying, oh, this is a potential spam bot, and now you get blacklisted. So that separate
Yeah.
server is like the next piece of the security.
Okay, that sounds good. And then, do you have recommendations on subdomains? Do you like it? Like, if your whole approach to selling is kind of product led, maybe you have some more of a product type domain, like coolgadget.com, as opposed to a variation on Acme Company that builds the cool gadget. That's a little silly sounding, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, for
Sorry,
sure.
listener.
um
I'll try to do better, but as long as you get the idea, right? Like how is it good or bad to be a little bit cute? Maybe that's actually a legit question, right? With some of these subdomains you would use in marketing.
you don't want to get too cute. There's a fine line, just because some of that cuteness could also become a spam trigger, if you
Hmm.
will, and get you kind of burnt by Google faster. So I would the best way to do it, I would say honestly, is to take whatever your domain is, and then as far as your sending something goes, use something like either hello dot, try dot, or go dot, especially in the beginning. Then over time, as you're running your campaigns, you're seeing your success, you're seeing what's going on, you can try and iterate as you're creating new sending subdomains as your team is scaling up. Hopefully that's the reason why you're doing so. Then you can potentially try and play around with those and A/B test even those domains to see if, hey, if it's sending the same message, same whatever, but the domain is a little different. Are we getting a better response? But in the beginning, I would say stick to like those pretty generic, either hello, try, or go dot. You should be good to go.
Okay, cool. So we've got our subdomain or two picked out. Go Fisher Company. or whatever. And we've got our email set up with that to send out our cold messages. So let's talk what's next in the chain of building a really effective outreach strategy here.
Yeah. So next from there is you want to definitely identify whom it is that you are targeting. And you want to get pretty granular with this. So for example, if you're a candle company, you make candles and you want to start, using cold email to get your candles out there more. Okay, yeah, you want to speak to, retailers, maybe small business owners, whatever the case may be. But you want to also be looking a level deeper and saying, okay, those are the industries I want to go after. But then now, who are those target job titles, if you will? So in this particular case, you might want to go after retail buyers, owners, founders, whatever the case may be, and really bring it down to that level of titles. You want to look at obviously locations if you're location specific, so on and so forth, and amass this list of as many different contacts as you can that fit that criteria that you're going after.
Now, I have noticed recently that a lot more marketers are defeating my spam filter, which is good for them. How are you? And I imagine you know what they're doing. How are some ways you
Yeah.
can defeat the spam filters and get these messages through once you have really good targeting in place?
Well, honestly, what we were speaking on previously in regards to the setting up of those sending subdomains, running SMTP servers in the background as well. Those naturally are helping some spam filters as well, um, because by using those, you're increasing the reputation of those sending subdomains over time, as long as you're consistently sending. From there, in addition to all that, the which we didn't get into that, but the copy and the subject lines that you're using, and not using spam trigger words in your copy. For example, you know, saying things like click here for the discount code, or try this here for free, things of that nature in your cold email, especially in your subject line or first two sentences, are going to get you blocked by those spam filters much faster versus if you're sending these cold emails and saying those same things but in different verbiage. You'll end up getting through those spam filters more often than not.
Well, and so that's a great segue to the next piece, which is the content. So you've given us a couple of ideas as to what to avoid. Is there a way that the team can know that? Is there some AI I can plug in and judge my copy for some of these trigger terms, or what? Tell us a bit more about that. Building some
Yeah.
subject lines and copy that'll
Um,
get through.
so I mean, there's certainly many different lists and sources on there in terms of like cold email templates. But I would say first and foremost, you want to think of it in terms of when you're going to like a strip mall and you're seeing those placards that are saying, "Hey, try discount here." All those words are the words you don't want to use first and foremost. There isn't a None of these, Google's, Microsoft, or wherever are publishing necessarily, "Hey, here's all the stuff that we look for," because then naturally all of us marketers would just be like, okay, those are the words that we're not going to use. So there isn't any one tell all source for all this. So part of it is just through trial and error. But other parts of it is certainly those key selling buzzwords that you quite frankly see on commercials, whether you're looking on YouTube or Facebook and seeing those ads. Like those keywords, especially together, are going to be those things. And it's not to say that, hey, if you use it in one email, you're going to get flagged. But now, if you're sending these cold emails and these cadences that you have set up, and they're repeatedly going out each day, over time, that's where the flagging comes into play.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are
Yeah.
some on the positive side of things? What are some good ideas for how to write headlines and messages that will make it through to the reader and get them opened? What are some best
Yeah.
practices on that part?
Um, Well, first and foremost, I would say, believe it or not, the simpler it is, the better. Like many people try to get very cheeky with their subject lines and try to, say something that's never been said before or anything like that. What I've seen, at least recently, that has been working very well is actually not using any capital letters in the subject lines and keeping the subject lines to maybe 3 words tops. So very much using like that 3-word approach to summarize what it is that you're doing or the pain point that you're expressing in the email is another great one as well. So, for example, if you're using a product that is ultimately aimed to help people get customer acquisition, literally I would use the subject line customer acquisition, no capital letters, um, and that you'd be surprised for whatever reason how many people will actually open that email, look at it, and then ultimately decide based upon what they see if they're gonna move forward or not.
That's a good one. You got any more?
So let's see. After customer acquisition, in terms of subject lines, you just mean other things you can kind
Other
of
other ideas for getting the human the human being on the other end of this deal to
yeah.
want to open it up.
Another big thing to think about, and it actually took surprisingly, it didn't really dawn on me until maybe like 2, 3 years ago, is realizing that when people are receiving their emails, many times it's not on their desktop. They're looking at it on their phone, and on their phone, you can preview potentially either the first couple sentences of that email, or even depending on how many emails are in your inbox at one given time, when you scroll down, you can read the entire email without ever opening the email. So, keeping that in mind, you definitely want your first 2 or 3 sentences to be kind of to the point, whether it's introducing yourself, introducing the product, introducing what it is that you do. You want to use that in your basically your first 3 sentences or first 2 lines, I would really say, not even sentences, to just bring in the reader. Kind of thinking like when you're opening a book, those first lines is what's going to get you to continue reading to see if you're even interested. Same approach here with cold email. In fact, maybe doubly so, because this cold email is, hey, it's just a couple of lines to begin with, to kind of get people to take the next step.
Good stuff. So you mentioned earlier on about trying to go right in for the sale as a
Hmm.
no-no. What should these emails be structured to do, and how does that fit into an overall business development strategy?
Yes. So your cold emails, how I look at cold emails is I look at them as mini movie trailers, if you will. And
Mm.
with the idea stating that the goal of the cold email is, in terms of a movie, to get you to come buy a ticket to see my movie or to get you to come see my movie. Now, in terms of cold email, it's not necessarily to sell the product, but it's to get you to either A, book a meeting with me for me to sell you the product, or B, click on this link to sign up link, to get more information on the product, join my newsletter, sign up for this blog, whatever the case may be. So knowing that, what you want to do is say, okay, when we looked at the targeting and said, hey, these are people we want to go after, what are their pain points? What is their current situation in whatever it is that you're pitching? So, for example, if you're pitching a solution for um, front end developers, and you say, okay, what is the current problem with front end developers? What are their current pain points? What are they dealing with? And then you use that in the email to pitch, hey, this is why you should come chat with me. And then another big thing is, at the end of the email, your ask, you do not want your ask to be something that is too committal. So, for example, it's things that we're seeing right now that's driving engagement is providing a value add. So, saying, hey, would you like for me to send you our white paper that shows how you can get started with your front end development today at no cost, for example? Oh, now the reader's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm in an agreeable state. I'd love to kind of see this. Worst case scenario doesn't work for me. Okay, now you get a yes. Now they're in your queue in your pipeline, and you can continue working them, and now they're a warmer lead.
So, how do you best recommend for this email initiative to dovetail with everything else that's going on? Like, perhaps I have some social media based outreach going on, and
Mhm.
obviously, I should have some technology that lets me know whether that email was opened or not. Maybe nothing else happens. Do you? Is there are some savvy ways that we can follow up with some of these leads that at least opened our first message, where the business development team can know that and go find those folks and start reaching out as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you're when you're sending these emails, if you're using a platform like I mentioned, like Mailchimp, Apollo, SalesLoft, whatever the case would be, they'll definitely have in there those your open rates, your who's opened the email, so on and so forth. I would say in terms of next steps, if you're not getting a ton of responses on that first step email, that's okay as well. Typically, what we see is the most people tend to respond post the second and third step anyway. So the second and third step are really your sweet spot emails in an email cadence. Ideally, I would say you want your email cadences to be 3 to 4 steps max. Um, and then, you can always refresh those campaigns, 30, 60, 90 days down the line. Um, but in terms of answering your question, That second and third step is the sweet spot and how you want to follow up. There's a few different tactics. Currently, I'm in love with our nudge content version, which is the second step is of one line, super quick. Hey, just sending a quick nudge to see if you saw the information I sent previously. Thanks. Cool. And then as long as you set this up within your platform, that you want your email sending out as a thread, so that whenever someone's getting the next step within that email, they're seeing all the previous emails that you sent as well. This is another psychological approach, if anything else, to get people like, man, this person sent me a bunch of emails, never responded. Let me actually respond to this person one way or the other.
Very cool. Well, so let's set some expectations for the business development team that may be giving this a second look. What
Absolutely.
are what are considered good numbers on an outreach campaign of cold emailing?
Yeah. Um, I would say from an open rate perspective, um, 40% and above, you're doing pretty good. Um, from a reply rate perspective, I mean, currently in the market, I would say if you're getting a 3 to 5% reply rate, you're definitely doing something well. Within those replies, in your interested reply rates, if those are anywhere from zero point 0.1 to 0.3%, that's good. That's really good. And then above 0.3%, you're really doing well. Obviously, depending on the volume and your targets as well. But I would say those are your kind of baseline metrics you want to be looking at.
Are there certain transactional constraints that make this a better versus not such a good approach to take? For example, if we're reaching for six-figure enterprise size deals, is this maybe not the best approach? Is it something where it's a little bit more transactional, or do you find it can work everywhere? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I would say cold email can work in all arenas for sure. Now, when you're talking about those big six-figure enterprise size deals, depending on what exactly it is that you're selling, what you're doing, cold email may not be your best approach in terms of my primary vehicle of driving leads. For those bigger size deals, yes, I would say you'd want to use cold email more for those people that are on your wish list where you're reaching out to them via LinkedIn with very personal messaging, so on and so forth. So for those, I would say yes, you can use cold email, but those are more for just reaching out to those people that you weren't reaching out to, as I kind of mentioned earlier. Outside of those type of deals, yes, whether you're doing anything that you're doing for signups, for example, like let's say you have a freemium business model where the goal is to get people to sign up. This cold email is tremendous for that. You can put in UTM links in your emails so that you can track that customer's journey post email onto your website as well. And so that you can even see, hey, which email is getting the most people over to the website, which email are people coming over to the website the most and actually clicking sign up, so on and so forth. Looking in your Google Analytics is a huge plus. So anything where you're trying to drive signups, cold email is amazing. Trying to book meetings, like I said, cold email is great as well, but you would definitely want to mix it with other lead gen sources over time. But it's definitely a great place to start out.
Yeah, a lot of our SaaS based listeners are going to love that because a lot of them have those models you just named, and you know, fairly transactional sized accounts can quickly grow from there. So that's a great to hear. Well, I'll tell you what, it's been a really great conversation and it's gone by very quickly. And I'm grateful to you for that, Chrisley. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with our audience. I know that the listener would
Absolutely.
love to go further with you. What's the best way they can do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, you can always feel free to check us out on senders.co. Hit the contact now button, you'll get me, and we can certainly have a chat and delve a little deeper into your situation for sure.
Nice. At senders.co. I'll put that on the screen. We'll put in the show notes. And when they fill in the form, they might actually get to talk to you. So that'd be pretty fantastic. Well, awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, it's time to go to Q&A. So hopefully you folks that are on our live team have got some great questions for us. And I think I see a few here. And we'll do some Q&A with our expert on board. Let me take a look and see what we got. Yeah, here's one. This is a little bit, and Matthew, you can even restate this if you want, but I saw a little bit of a side conversation here. This is from Matthew Young. what he's referring to, he says, I try to avoid getting sent to spam by not putting in too many links in his emails. And he tries to actually go through and by hand rephrase them so that they look a little different as he's going through. Would you give any advice to Matthew, perhaps, Chrisley?
Yeah, I mean, I'd first be curious if these are emails you're sending at scale or one-off cold emails, because that would make a difference in how this is answered. But in the event that, let's say, these are one-off cold emails that you're sending out, then yeah, absolutely. You don't necessarily need to rephrase every single last email because I'm sure that's a time suck. But what you're doing here does make a lot of sense in terms of not putting in too many links. Yes, that is also very true. But more importantly, is you don't want to be putting in so many different links that are to so many different places. Because one, you're just directing your prospect into many different places. That's not necessarily where you want them to go per se. And two, yes, that can potentially get you into more spam. So if you are sending links, I would say use things like Bitly, if you can, if they're in different places. So at least the link name is the same. Also, you can use a UTM code UTM code sites to generate your UTM codes, excuse me. And so that now you can just place those into the email, and so that they offer that same kind of protection, if you will.
Nice. Sounds like we have a fellow practitioner that's been listening as well. He shares an interesting insight. It gets back to my earlier question about
Mhm.
synergizing with our human outreach, and he's got a suggestion that maybe you could send a message to some of these prospects saying that you uh, sent them a link on LinkedIn, a campaign to connect on LinkedIn, and you could kind of line those two up. It sounds like that would have to be managed very carefully, and the teams would have to be very closely aligned. Maybe even have one person overseeing it. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is a great, for example, replacement for like what I mentioned, the nudge. How currently that's kind of my favorite thing using that nudge line. In this particular case, this is another version of that where you can certainly do this. To your point, you'd want to make sure you're using this is definitely something you wouldn't want to necessarily be doing with one-off emails as you might, lose track unless you're, just very organized. But you definitely want to be using something like an Apollo, like a Sales Loft, tracking all those email sends, and then uploading that CSV so that okay, when you get this LinkedIn step, it is after you receive the email, and they're not getting that LinkedIn email maybe prior to them actually getting a ping on LinkedIn. So that part of it you'll want to be mindful of. But outside of that, that's actually a very good tactic because there
Love
are a
that.
lot of people that we're seeing more and more who won't respond to an email, but will respond to you via LinkedIn.
Yeah. Here's a question from Alex. He's asking, what kind of messaging would you put in the email if you're just trying to reach out to a prospect cold with the goal of getting a meeting? So maybe you can kind of give him an idea as how that could be set up.
Yeah, absolutely. First, you want to meet the prospect where they're at. So, why are you trying to get in touch with this prospect? What problem is it that you're trying to solve? Um, Once you know the problem that you're trying to solve, you would simply do, or what I would simply do, state an email saying who I am and where I'm from or whatever the case may be, and then say, hey, if you're basically, I know you have this problem, but I'm going to ask, hey, if you're suffering with this problem. Um, Here are some of the things that I'm currently doing that solves this problem. List out those two or three bullet points, a quick little tidbit on those bullet points, keep it super brief and kind of to the point. And then at the end of the email or the body, you would say something to the effect of, "Hey, I'd love to have a quick chat to see if any of these solutions I have can help with you." And then either provide a calendar link, or you can say after you say, "Hey, would love to have this chat with you," or if easier, would love to continue the communication through email. This way, instead of the ask so much being, "Hey, come talk to me," the ask is, "Hey, how would you like for me to continue this conversation with you to answer your questions?" So now you're turning it from either, okay, they read the email and no answer, to, okay, I'm interested. How do I want to continue this? If that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, maybe you have a similar concern here where just like going in too quickly for the sale could be a problem. Going too quickly
Right.
in for a meeting, I mean, it's still a sale. I mean, their time is extremely valuable. So you kind of have to work your way there by getting in touch, being in touch with their pain point that you solve, sounds like.
A-
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And also just understanding the how many steps this is. So it kind of goes into, are these one-off cold emails that you're sending, or are these part of the cadence? Because if they're part of the cadence, understand, okay, you have 3, 4 steps. So at the end of the first step, you can use that first step really as an introductory piece into what problem you're solving. And at the bottom of the email, you can say, something, not really even ask for them to do anything, but send them a link to the website or your blog post or whatever the case may be. And then in your second email, ask for, hey, I can send you more information or my white paper that explains this, or hop on a call with me. So now, A, the prospect isn't feeling bombarded. B, as much as we're the ones selling the product and always think about, hey, got to get more leads, got to get more leads, things do stay on the top of people's minds. People do open these emails. Even when you're looking at your conversion rates and you're seeing all these unopened emails, trust me when I tell you guys, people open their emails and they read their emails and they will circle back when things come up. So this kind of goes into one of the bigger mistakes that I didn't mention, and it's refreshing these leads. People are
Mm,
always trying to search for new email addresses, and they've had all these people that they've emailed all year, maybe once, twice, 3 times, and never emailed again.
mm,
Re-engage with all those people in a new campaign. And what I like to do is segment out how their results from the previous campaign. So people who went through every single step, never unsubscribed, but didn't open the emails. Okay,
mm,
for those guys, I'm gonna use a different pain point to try and get the jigger their mind. People who opened every email but then didn't respond. Okay, that could have been a timing issue. It could have been whatever. Okay, I'm gonna use this approach. And so, really using all these lead lists that you're buying and purchasing to their fullest extent and getting the juice out of them.
yeah.
Sorry, I was a little long-winded there.
We don't fault guests for being long-winded when you're dropping gold, brother. Yeah, it's good. Um, so here's a question from Levy. Can you provide like a before and after case study? And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just top of mind. Can you kind of characterize maybe one of your own experiences in working with the client? Maybe conceal the name, but just describe the company
Yeah.
and give us before and after story.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were about last summer. We were working with this tea company of all companies that were looking to expand their outreach, and they had a sign up process, a freemium process, but an also direct wholesale process as well in terms of producing sales. So people could either set up meetings or just bulk order on the website. Their issue was they just weren't getting enough people to click on their emails and look at their stuff. So what we did, taking a very different approach than even kind of what we normally do, is first we told them, hey, what are your best and most popular teas that people are buying?
Hmm.
Once they told us that, we put that image into their emails, into the body of their emails, um, so that now people are seeing what the best product is, not even realizing that. Then from there, what we said was, okay, let's look at your targeting. At the time, they were targeting mostly restaurants, pizzerias, basically places where people go to eat. And what we told them was, look, what you're really a tea thing. You should be reaching out to all places that have walk-in people, offices, so on and so forth. So we started reaching out to dentist offices, doctors' offices, um, churches, office buildings, schools, barber shops, anywhere where people might have a what are those jugs of waters that used to be off? Say, hey, you could also have tea. Why not? So we expanded her target base, if you will. So after all that, then looking at the contents of the messaging, we said, hey, you're overcomplicating this, trying to sell this to you as the most Amazonian whatever, instead of just saying, hey, here's our value for you. All your guests that are coming in, throats parts, looking for something to drink, and we segment them out by industry. So each cadence, if you will, each 3 or 4 step cadence had different messaging per the industry that they were being sent to. So for dentists, we have messaging for dentists, messaging for doctors, messaging for plumbers, whatever the case may be. A/B test this over time, and they saw a 3x return in terms of just the click through rates on their website over a 3 month span.
Hmm. Nice, nice. That's pretty cool. That's a great story. So just being kind of savvy about what's actually happening among their buyers and playing up an opportunity once you saw one there. That's really powerful. I've got two different questions in that are kind of, I think we could maybe answer them together. So Tom Bold is asking, what platform are you using? I know you probably have more than one that you like. Maybe there's
Mhm.
some that you like less. Maybe we'll leave them unmentioned, but there are some that you like better, and maybe you could share with that why. And then let's combine that then with this other a follow up question from Matthew Young, who's also curious, about putting picks in. You just talked about putting a pick in. Sounds like it. There is the impression. I had this impression too that could land you in spam. So maybe platform and deliverability combined answer there, if you would.
Yes, great question. So for me, primarily I'm using Apollo in terms of my email sending platform,
Hmm.
and primarily also just because it has like a quarter of a billion leads in there as well. So it's kind of a Zoom info and HubSpot kind of married together from that aspect. So that's why I like Apollo. But Sales Loft, excuse me, is another great tool as well. Mailchimp is pretty good as well, and just in terms of getting those email cadences set up for sure. And the other question in regards to the deliverability aspect of pictures, yes, pictures can certainly um, harmfully affect your deliverability. In
Hmm.
the event that we were using them with that previous company, we set up a separate sending subdomain and email address that we were using just for the cadences that had photos versus the cadences where that were the plain text. Primarily speaking, though, yes, you definitely want, especially with your B2B cold emails, definitely want to stick into the plain text field if you can, or world if you can. But in this aspect, we just kind of double down on our security efforts and set up separate contingencies so that if there was any issues there, we can very quickly swap it out, repair it, and it has no impact on the other cold emails that are going out.
Okay. So occasionally it can make sense, but overall, stick with text.
Yeah, and then if you do want to use photos, I would just be very mindful of the volume of those particular cadences.
Hmm.
Maybe not have those running all the time, maybe for very special promotions or where it makes sense to have a photo in the cold email because it's
Hmm.
driving the text, then okay, but just be very mindful of it.
Awesome. Well, I got to say, this was a great conversation, Chrisley. You were equal to your billing. You definitely seem to be a great
Thank you.
expert, and I encourage listener to go and find Chrisley and his whole team over there at senders.co. Chrisley, thanks for being a real star today. Appreciate you.
Oh, hey, I appreciate it as well. Thank you for the time. And to everyone who logged in and listened, I appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out anytime.
Awesome. Well, and we thank you, the listener, as well, for making the show such a success. It's a ball for me every single week to get to learn from experts on my second favorite topic after family. And if you've been enjoying as much as I do, of course, you can go back and check out all of our previous guests by going wherever you like to get podcasts and download your favorite episode of the Evolved Sales Leader. We're focused here primarily on B2B sales, but anything sales and business development related, there is a treasure trove of insights there on the Evolve Sales Leader podcast. Go check it out wherever you like to do that sort of thing. And I also want to give a big shout out to our sponsor. We're proudly powered by Overpass. They are the leading platform for getting business development related talent on your phones quickly and economically. Check them out at overpass.com. It's free for the hiring manager to open an account, post your job ad. The AI will send you 15 or 20 great candidates, and you get a free account executive to help further coordinate hiring some rock stars from a global workforce. Check them out at overpass.com. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Once again, thanks for being here. I'm signing off. Everybody take care. We'll see you at the same time, same station next time. Bye-bye for now.